Urban Meyer taking shots at the SEC. We'll tell you what he said. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, let's dive into it, as we got some news being made over the weekend as Urban Meyer saying that the Big Ten has passed the SEC, making an appearance on another duly noted podcast with Pat Dooley. He argued that the Big Ten has passed the SEC. Here was Urban's quote. He said, "You know what the SEC's done? It's raised the level. But the Big Ten has passed the SEC at the upper part. If you would have told me that 10 years ago, I would have said it's not even close, because it's not." The Big Ten, of course, they've won the last two national championships, Michigan 2 years ago and Ohio State last year. And this past season, the first year of the expanded playoff, the Big Ten got 4 teams in. The SEC only got 3. And, of course, this came on the heels of, 20 years of the SEC dominating, winning a ton of national championships. In fact, before that, they had won 5 of 6 from 2017 to 2022. But I think it's also worth noting here who Urban Meyer is employed by. And that is Fox with the Big Noon Kickoff, which prominently features, guess who? Big Ten teams. And so when I hear somebody like Urban Meyer say stuff like this, and Joel Klatt, I'm sorry, you got to remember who they work for. It's the same reason why people claim ESPN has SEC bias, which, by the way, they signed that massive TV deal here in recent years. But it's like, I think Tim Brando used to get it when he worked for CBS, and CBS had the SEC contracts. It's like, whoever has those teams, they're going to be inherently biased for those teams. So it doesn't shock me that Urban says it, but man, it's like, he also was a Buckeye homer, right? He coached for the Buckeyes, won a championship there. Urban went on to say, when I first got to the Big Ten, even my wife said, "What in the world? This is a slow man's game up here." And I like to think we really changed that with the Buckeyes. And then everyone else started investing in their school, started recruiting players. As a result, the Wolverine team 2 years ago was one of the best teams I've seen. The Buckeyes team this past year is one of the best I've ever seen. And now you're seeing Penn State and some of these other teams have great success. To me, and I was reading this On 3 article, they said, narratives can shift quickly in college football. All it's going to take is another SEC team to win it all next year, and obviously that'll change the narrative. But the reality is this: the Big Ten was very top-heavy last year. I mean, let's be real. Oregon at the top, followed by Indiana, Penn State, and Ohio State. The Buckeyes, they went on to win the championship. Of course, had this been in the previous years of a 14 playoff, Ohio State may not have even been in there. But Oregon, they turned out to be a playoff fraud. They were one and done, lost by 20 to Ohio State. I got to think there's no way in hell Indiana repeats what they did last year. I mean, again, here's the problem with having these 16 and 18 team conferences is there are some teams that are just going to avoid the good teams. We talked about that with Texas this past year. Oklahoma got all the toughest teams in the SEC. Texas had a few. But, there's going to be years where the schedule is more navigatable than other years. To me, Penn State, they had their typical 10-2 type season, which normally gets them to a Peach Bowl. But, this year with the expanded playoff, got them in. They had cakewalks in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs against SMU and Boise, 2 teams that, again, in a 14 playoff would have had no business ever getting in. And, of course, Michigan fell off the face of the earth this past year, going 8-5. Urban Meyer goes on to say, "I'm anxious to see the SEC fight back because next year is another year." And I'll close with this. The SEC, that SEC Big Ten fight, the top, obviously, the last 2 years goes to the Big Ten, but still, that middle to the bottom, it's the SEC by far. You've got 8 teams, 9 teams in the SEC that think they can go win a national title. No other conference has ever had that. And I agree with that. The SEC, to me, just had way more parity last year. And that was expected when you added 2 powers like Texas and Oklahoma. I know OU was down, but they still won a few games they weren't supposed to. And so that kind of goes with, earlier this week we did the 2025 SEC win totals from FanDuel. And, first time in a while, the SEC does not have a team that's projected to win 10 games or more. They had 3 teams at 9.5 wins, Alabama, Georgia, and Texas. And then they had LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee at 8.5. And then this grouping of 7 and 5 or 7.5 wins teams with Auburn, A&M, Mizzou, and South Carolina. Again, this is just projected win totals, and obviously it's halves, so you're betting the over or under. Obviously, if you think Alabama, Georgia, and Texas are all playoff teams, you're going to have them over 9.5 wins. Could have 10 wins, could have 11 wins, could have 12, some of these. But to me, again, this just speaks more to the parity. Like Vandy, the cellar dweller, got better last year with Diego Pavia. Arkansas was halfway decent with Taylon Green at quarterback and Bobby Petrino calling plays. Florida got an elite recruit quarterback in DJ Lagway and Billy Napier. They went on a heater at the end of the year. Oklahoma, as bad as they were, still beat Alabama. So, again, I just think, look, this is an SEC podcast, so we're never going to give a tip of the cap to the Big Ten. Congrats. You each won a championship the last 2 years. But we saw Michigan drop off the first face of the earth last year. There's a chance Ohio State does that as well. They've recruited well. Transfer portal done well. But there's no guarantee they're going to get there. And then again, like Oregon was a big fat fraud. Congrats to the Ducks for having nice seasons. But Dan Lanning, why don't you win some before I start hearing about how great of a coach you are there? So, look, just saying Urban Meyer making claims that the Big Ten is better than the SEC right now. I'll disagree. Again, you could say Ohio State was a great team last year. It has nothing to do with the Big Ten. You could say 2 years ago, Michigan won it. They played by the way, the crappiest non-conference schedule you could ever play. They played like Bowling Green and, I don't know, pick a high school. That's who Michigan played 2 years ago in their non-con. But regardless, it is high tide, and the SEC's got to win a championship this year just to shift the narrative back, just to get back to conference dominance for the Big Ten. All right, let's get to a few other stories. How about Hugh Freeze making some headlines a couple of days ago over at Auburn, clearly lowering the bar? Hugh Freeze was on with the guys at the next round live, and he said to them, quote, "I'm not a fool. I think we've got to get to a bowl game. I think our administration understands. I inherited a program that didn't have a top 25 recruiting class for 4 years. You're not going to win in this league with that. We've now had 2 full recruiting classes, both top 10. I think one more, and your roster looks complete. But I'm still not naive. We could have won some more games last year that we didn't. We got to find a way to make sure we're excellent in those areas that cost us those." Look, reaching a bowl game in year 3 is a pretty low standard. And that quote from Hugh Freeze, I get what he's saying, right? Like, they've underachieved. We didn't even make a bowl game last year. But, like, that should be the floor. The floor should be, at minimum, we have to get to a bowl game. But the way he phrased it, "I'm not a fool, I think we got to get to a bowl game," makes it sound like if he gets to the Birmingham Bowl, all is right in Auburn. And it's clearly not. Freeze's first Tigers team finished 6-7, losing to Maryland in the Music City Bowl. And then last year they took a step backward from that, went 5-7, didn't even make the postseason. And again, Freeze noting, "Oh, look what I inherited from Brian Harsin. Oh my God." Well, Auburn has not finished with a winning record since they went 6-5 in 2020. That was Gus Malzahn's final year. And yes, he has recruited well, tremendously well. His 2023 or 2024 signing class ranked top 10. 2025 class ranked, I think, at number 8 in 24/7 Sports Composite. Freeze went on to say, "Obviously, I'm a competitor, and I want to deliver to the Auburn people. It's time for us to do that." And getting to a bowl game is typically been like, that's never been a standard for Hugh Freeze teams. Like, they typically fall out of bed and go to a bowl game. 12 seasons as an FBS coach. This was just the second time one of his teams failed to get to at least 6 wins. The only other time was 2016 at Ole Miss when he went 5-7, which was his final season at Ole Miss. But, talk about that win total. And to me, when we talk win totals, like 7-5 for Auburn, I almost feel like, or 7.5 wins, to me, you almost have to go over that. Like, to me, 8-4. 8-4 or better gets the Auburn fan base excited. And look, you got a quarterback. Like, you got Jackson Arnold, who's a former 5-star recruit. You got all these stud receivers. It's got to be a better year. It just has to. So Auburn, they open the season coming up against Baylor on August 29th. Just like I've said it about Brian Kelly and LSU, feels like their opener at Clemson is a must win. That one feels like a must win for Hugh Freeze. You can't lose to Baylor in the opener. And I know you're going on the road. I don't know who scheduled that, but beat Baylor. You got to beat them. SI, Austin Walls had an interesting piece talking about the importance of DJ Durkin getting that extension this offseason for Auburn. I think part of that was schools like Ohio State and others that had openings at DC maybe coming and sniffing around. But some people saying, in this article said it, that perhaps it's just kind of a backup plan in case Hugh Freeze stumbles out of the gate. They could make DJ Durkin the interim in waiting if they were to have to fire Hugh Freeze. And I don't think they're going to do that. Again, things would have to go really south for Auburn out of the gates. I'm talking like lose 55-0 to Baylor and then, lose a couple more and this thing really go off the rails. But it was just an interesting take from Austin Walls over the SI saying, maybe that was kind of a thought process. DJ Durkin maybe could be that interim that, didn't really have a great interim in Cadillac when you got rid of Harsin, but we shall see. All right. When we return here on Locked On SEC, some news from Georgia, some news from Alabama. We will get to that coming your way here in just a second, right here on Locked On SEC. Hey, but first, guys, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, all the entertainment you're spending for? It's easy to lose track of your spending, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. They're going to be your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And when you check out Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You're going to track all your accounts, all your investments, all your spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When you start using Monarch, you're going to realize just how much you spend on stuff like food delivery, the apps that make it super easy for you to deliver food to your house. You're paying way more than you need to on ride shares and all that kind of stuff. It'll make you want to budget smarter and save more. Of course, you can manage money with your partner. That's smoother than ever with the Monarch Money app. Go take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use our code LOCKEDONCollege. It's very simple. Go to monarchmoney.com, enter the code LOCKEDONCollege when you get signed up. That's going to get you 50% off your first year, 50. That's monarchmoney.com, MONARCH, money.com. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege. Get half off your first year over there at Monarch Money. All right, run along here to Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Look, we're going to get to some baseball news. We've got the SEC tournament field set for baseball this week. We've got some softball news, who's advancing out of the regionals, but we've had some football nuggets that we needed to get to. We didn't get to do a show on Friday, so we're a little late on these, having to bring these to you. But let's get over to Auburn as Kirby Smart. They missed out on a 5-star recruit, 5-star offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell. We told you guys about that last week. Well, Kirby Smart appearing on the Paul Feinbaum show last week. He was at the Celebrity Pro-Am at the Regions Tradition Champions Club in Hoover. Well, Kirby Smart noting his preference is to pay top dollar to established contributors already on the roster. And this fits with the narrative from a lot of other folks. But Kirby Smart saying, I just want to be able to have a freshman come in and not make more than a senior. Kirby went on to say, where we are right now, I think every coach agrees we're in a good place with being able to compensate players. Call it pay for play, call it NIL. I don't care what you call it. We're all in a good place with that. We just want it to be in a way that is sustainable. It is an interesting angle, right? Like, let's talk about this realistically. Let's say, and I'll have to look at Georgia's roster to come up with a, current senior, because that's specifically what he said. He said a freshman, incoming freshman making more than a senior. And I get it, right? Jackson Cantwell, 5-star offensive tackle, asking for a high dollar figure. And by the way, he ended up committing to Miami. So, the Miami Hurricanes are paying a pretty penny to get him. But, when you talk about Georgia and, their roster, I mean, we could even say somebody like Stetson Bennett, or I'm sorry, not Stetson Bennett, Gunnar Stockton. Wondering if Stetson Bennett had another year of eligibility left. But you look at Gunnar Stockton, and obviously he's projected to be the quarterback now. And waited his turn behind Carson Beck and did it the right way. He's only a redshirt sophomore or true sophomore. Well, going into his third year with Georgia regardless. But, let's say Gunnar Stockton's making, I don't know, $500K in NIL. He's probably making more than that. But, like, if Jackson Cantwell comes in and wants $3 million a year, yeah, that's a tough territory to go down, where you're paying the incoming freshman who, I guess, he's going to start next year, 2026, as a true freshman. I guess that would be the thought, as an 5-star offensive tackle. But, like, it's just it's an interesting angle to talk. I get where Kirby's coming from there, but he went on to say, I'd like for other sports to be able to still survive. We are on the brink of probably 1 to 2 years away from a lot of schools cutting sports. What's the pushback going to be when you start cutting non-revenue sports? I don't want that to happen. And that's kind of where this thing is going to head, right? I mean, this is the unspoken tale of all this, but who's the big profit maker? It's football. They're the ones writing, so many times football makes this big profit, and they write a check to the school, and that helps cover all the non-revenue generating sports like softball and tennis and all this kind of stuff. Well, I think you're going to come to a head with now having to write checks. Like, it used to be a school just made revenue and all the big dogs up top profited. And then this other money, we wrote a check back to the school and we put all these resources in. That's how you saw, constantly keeping up with the Joneses. We need a new athletic facility. We need a new nutrition center. We need all this. Like, that's how you take all the profits, you invest it back in the school, and you're getting all these updated, great new facilities and all that. Well, some of that's going to kind of pump the brakes, because now you're taking some of that money that used to just be pure profit, and now it's going back into this pool that's going to be paying the players with the revenue sharing. And that's fine. It makes sense. But I think you're going to see some schools that, to Kirby's point, in the next, maybe not immediately, but within the next 2 to 3 years, are going to start going, we're losing a lot of money sending that tennis team halfway across the country to go play conference games. Maybe, they fly commercial instead of private. Maybe they take a bus instead of flying. I mean, these are some of the things that are going to be talked about because of lost revenue. And so I kind of agree with Kirby. Like, what's going to be the fallout here? Now, his thing is, he thinks that there need to be parameters set. And this goes to the whole getting the government involved with NIL and capping what's spent and that sort of thing. Kirby went on to say it's trying times because not everybody knows what rules we're playing by, but it'll work itself out. It's one of those challenging times for everybody. Our coaches and assistants are the ones on the road having to deal with it, and the head coaches are out trying to raise money and playing golf tournaments like he was. So anyway, to be monitored or to be watched, to be updated, whatever. But I get what Kirby's saying. It's a very interesting take, though, right? I mean, we saw this a couple times at schools in the last 2 years where there's a kid in the transfer portal who's just going to be a rotational defensive line piece, and he's asking for $800K or $900K. Well, then you've got like your star offensive lineman who could be a projected first-round pick making, close to the same money. And that's where schools have to really get into is this worth it? Like, bringing this guy who's never played in the SEC before, coming from a smaller school, are we going to pay him the same as an all-SEC offensive lineman? So, get what Kirby's saying there, but by the same realm, if he had landed Cantwell, he'd be ecstatic, saying we're we're coming. We're loading this roster up with big 5-star talent, and watch out. All right, other news going around. How about over at Alabama? Kalen DeBoer declaring Ty Simpson the current starting quarterback if Alabama had to play right now. This was Kalen DeBoer Wednesday appearing on the Paul Feinbaum show. He was pressed about who will be the starting quarterback. Of course, Alabama does not officially begin the season until August 30th when they head to Tallahassee to take on Florida State. DeBoer telling Paul Feinbaum, if you had to go play right now, go with the veteran and Ty. Did a nice job this spring. As for the others, we just need to keep the competition going. They know that's their expectation because they know where they're at right now isn't good enough for where we need to be to have the success we want to have as a football team. Now, Austin Mack and Keelan Russell obviously still have summer workouts, still have a lot of time. And in fact, ESPN put out an article and put, Keelan Russell, one of those rising stars to keep an eye on. And that's where a lot of people I talk at Alabama or that are Alabama fans, they say, look, Ty Simpson may win this job. Ty Simpson may start the opener against Florida State. But do we think Ty Simpson's still going to be a starter by midseason or later in the year? This could be a deal where Keelan Russell works his way in with some packages early in the year, and more he gets comfortable, maybe takes over that job. Now, again, is that a gamble for a team that has playoff hopes this season? We will see. But, again, just one of those storylines that, it became a storyline. In fact, I saw the headlines like Ty Simpson, the starter. Okay, but the caveat was the board said if we had to go play a game right now, which they obviously don't. All right, a few other football tidbits. Over at Missouri, their defensive line coach, Al Davis, announced his resignation on social media on Friday night. He announced he was stepping down to, quote, focus on family matters. He'd been on staff with Eli Drinkwitz since 2021. Drink putting out on social media, he said, I accepted Coach Davis's resignation as he's stepping away from our program. I want to thank him for his time with us and wish him the best moving forward. Drinkwitz later announced that David Blackwell will take over for Coach Davis. Blackwell joined the Mizzou staff in 2023 as an analyst, moved into an on-field role last year, and has 3 decades of college coaching experience, 11 years of experience as a defensive coordinator. So don't expect Mizzou to miss a beat there. Over Kentucky, they were dealing with some tragic tornadoes impacting parts of Kentucky over the weekend. Killed at least 18 people in that area. Well, Saturday night, Mark Stoops passing along a note of on social media his condolences, saying our thoughts and prayers are with everyone across the Commonwealth affected by those horrible storms. We stand with our state through this difficult time. We saw even Mark Pope and former Kentucky Wildcat Reed Shepard out there in those areas helping pick up debris and that kind of stuff. So really tough stuff there from the state of Kentucky. A few other tidbits here real quick. Florida, they picked up a commitment over the weekend from a 2026 D lineman out of Ohio in D lineman Jameer Perez, 3-star prospect. And then keep an eye on 2026 quarterback Bo Bentley. He's considered one of the top quarterbacks remaining undecided, and it sounds like it's down to LSU and Oklahoma for him. Seems like one that LSU absolutely has to have. They do not have a quarterback commit for 2026 as of yet, so keep an eye on that. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, roll along here. Locked On SEC. And without further ado, we got to get to some SEC baseball conversations. We now have the bracket set for the 2025 SEC tournament. But before we get to that, got to give a shout out to the Texas Longhorns, who won the regular season title and will be the top seed in the SEC tournament. Their lineup featured a lot of the same players from last year's second best offensive Big 12 squad. They made some changes with the pitching. Schlossnagle brought in pitching guru Max Weiner, who lowered the team's ERA from 4.91 last year to 3.53 this year. And, man, they were a preseason number 14 ranking. The preseason SEC coaches poll predicted the Longhorns to finish 8th in the SEC. Jim Schlossnagle saying after the game the other night, winning an SEC title during the regular season is harder than winning a national championship. We want to win a national title, but this is a test of endurance and grit, and obviously having a good team. Really proud of our players and the staff. And so now the focus shifts to Hoover, where we will have a loaded SEC tournament starting this week. All 16 teams qualify. If you missed that news, that was changed in the offseason and announced for the change with Oklahoma and Texas in the conference. So nobody left out of Hoover. Everybody's going, all 16 teams, but it's single elimination. And that's going to be the biggest difference for those purists of us who really have loved the SEC tournament throughout the years. You love the double elimination aspect of it. That's gone. It is single elimination. So you lose, you're done. You're going home. So here's how it shapes up. First round will get started on Tuesday. We'll have Mizzou versus Alabama, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. Then after that, we'll have Kentucky versus Oklahoma. Into the evening, we will get South Carolina versus Florida. And then a late night game, Texas A&M trying to keep their season alive, taking on Mississippi State, who's gotten hot the last couple of weeks. So that should be a fun day one on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we'll get the winner of Mizzou, Alabama taking on Tennessee, who is the number 8 team. The second game on Wednesday will be the winner of Kentucky, Oklahoma taking on Georgia. And then the winner of South Carolina versus Florida will take on Ole Miss. And the late night game, Auburn will get the winner of A&M versus Mississippi State. That will be a good one. And then Thursday into Friday, we will get the quarterfinals. Texas and Vanderbilt will play, as well as Arkansas and LSU. So it's kind of interesting how they broke it up. There will be a 4 p.m. Eastern game on Thursday, and then a 7:30 p.m. game Eastern on Thursday, and then the same thing on Friday. So 2 games Thursday, 2 games Friday. Interesting how that works out. So Arkansas and LSU, because of how this breaks up, will not play a game until Friday. So while a lot of teams are, heading to Hoover right now, getting ready to play games on Tuesday, Arkansas and LSU don't have to be there until Friday, and they're the number 2 and number 3 seeds. Vanderbilt's the 4, Texas is the 1. They play Thursday. And then, of course, the 4 winners from that will advance to the semifinals. They will play on Saturday, and then the championship game will be at 2 p.m. Central, 3 Eastern on Sunday on ESPN2. So that is how the schedule shapes up. Should be a fun field. But I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. They were saying, what incentive do some of these teams have? Especially the top 8 seeds. If you're a regional / super regional host site already, a national seed, what does a Texas or an LSU or an Arkansas have to prove at this point? They're going to be host sites, So I don't know. It's going to be intriguing, especially with a single elimination, right? Maybe you can even give your ace, your number 1 and number 2 starters a rest. Maybe just say, okay, we'll save you for a game 2 if we get to it in the SEC tournament. If not, if we're 1 and done, so be it. We got some rest and we go home and we get ready for what matters most. So just an interesting take on how this thing will play out in the single elimination. Going to be very interesting. All right, a few other tidbits here on the basketball side of things. I saw Florida. They set a date for a White House visit. That will come on Wednesday, May 21st. So this coming Wednesday, according to Gators Online, Florida will visit President Donald Trump and the White House this coming Wednesday to celebrate the national championship. Now, Florida is also set to host Boogie Fland on a visit. Florida is in the mix to land the former Arkansas guard who went and tried out the NBA draft process, but then announced he was withdrawing his name, going to go back to school. I've heard rumblings that maybe he could still go back to Arkansas, but he officially entered the portal. So he is looking around, and some folks think that he could land at Florida. That would be certainly an interesting storyline. The reigning national champs could potentially land one of the biggest names out there in the portal. One other note here in softball. So some teams that advanced. We got Oklahoma took care of Cal. They're advancing to the Super Regional this weekend. South Carolina beat North Florida to advance out of the Columbia Regional. Tennessee beat Ohio State to advance out of the Knoxville Regional. Florida, they handled up on Mercer to come out of the Gainesville Regional. Alabama snuck by Virginia Tech to win the Tuscaloosa Regional. And Georgia came back to beat Duke to win the Durham Regional. So congrats to Georgia. Now, as of this recording, we're keeping an eye on a couple of teams still in action. A&M is currently leading Liberty right now. Top seed A&M, they needed to beat Liberty twice to come out of the College Station Regional. And as of score right now. And that game, it's looking like that is going to happen. Later tonight, Arkansas will play Oklahoma State. Again, recording this on a Sunday evening, so don't know if Arkansas beat Oklahoma State to advance out of that one, but you guys know the result of that one already. And then Arizona was beating Ole Miss in the Tucson regional, so looks like Ole Miss eliminated there. And the other ones, how about LSU was eliminated in their own regional by Southeastern Louisiana? Not a great showing by Beth Tarina, and some folks actually thinking that that could lead to her being ousted at LSU. So Nebraska actually, they beat Southeastern, so they advanced out of the Baton Rouge Regional. Clemson eliminated Kentucky in the Clemson Regional, so they're moving on. Let's see, Texas Tech eliminated Mississippi State in the Lubbock Regional. Auburn was eliminated in the Tallahassee Regional by Florida State. And like I said, looks like Arizona up 10-1 on Ole Miss, so Ole Miss is going to be eliminated there. So that is the latest, but hey, congrats to the SEC teams that are advanced to the Super Regional. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if A&M takes care of business in Arkansas, that's 2 more. So that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Thank you for listening to us. For your second listening, you can check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. It's been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.